Hey, what's up YouTube? Today I'm going to make some metal. I'm starting off with two stacks of metal. One is 15 and 20 and the other is 1095. Both are high carbon steels and they work great for knives. The pattern I'm attempting today was first developed by Mareko Mamazi, and he's calling it a braided mosaic. It's a pretty cool looking pattern, and he's challenged a bunch of us to try it. So I thought I'd give it a go. Alex Steele did this a little while ago too, and it came out really, really beautiful. So I'm pretty excited about it. Here, once again, I'm stacking up alternating metals, so that way later on it'll provide a nice contrast. I've got a measure to fit the opening of my forge, which unfortunately is about 4 inches by 4 inches. So it keeps the forge nice and hot, but it limits how big of material I can put in there. So here I'm measuring up 4 inches of a stack, and next I'm going to clamp it and weld it together. So now we're clamping the metal. I believe it's really important to have a nice clean surface and you clamp it nice and tight together. This keeps any big air or gaps between the metal, which could form scale and possibly an inclusion later, which you definitely don't want because it won't be a solid piece of metal. So I clamp it in two places. I'm always looking for my gloves. Oh, there they are. And so now I'm going to weld the corners and then a line down the middle. And I weld, I don't weld the whole thing, some people do, but that's just more post grinding in order to get rid of the weld zone. I just weld it in basically, 6 places, and that keeps the metal nice and tight and straight together, and it prevents it from bowing when it heats up in the forge. We want everything to stay really close together. The closer it is, the less likely forge scale forms between the layers, and that'll make a cleaner and better weld in the long run. So there you have it. That's our prepped and pre-welded billet. I'm gonna count how many layers I have, just so I know. I believe this one ended up around 27 layers. It's a nice low count. It'll come out a little, more bold. And now we're gonna weld on the handle. So this way I have a way to get it in and out of the forge more easily. It's not easy no matter what. I mean, we're dealing with probably 6 to 7 pounds of metal here. And when you get that up to temperature, it's around 2200, 2250 degrees. So you're walking around with a really hot piece of heavy metal. You gotta be careful, but it's doable. Get a little flame going and then
Filming.
crack this. You gotta play with it a little bit too much, so you hear the right amount of like flow. You can't open it all the way, otherwise it'll just blow out. So we lit our forge and it's come up to temperature. I like to start my forge welds around 2150 to 2200 degrees. My forge is controlled with a little computer, that modulates the gas flow through a solenoid valve and a thermocouple. So it keeps it the perfect temperature. Now we're going to let them soak. So our metals come up to temperature and soaked for about 10 to 15 minutes. Now I'm setting the initial weld on my 16-ton hydraulic press from Coal Iron Works. I love this thing. Mine's been upgraded so it's a little faster, which makes it really good for forging. So by now we've gone through a couple forging passes. We've got the metal down to a smaller shape and more manageable size. I'm starting to turn it on bias here, which means slightly on corner. What this does is it provides a slight wave to the material, so it's not just flat stacks like we originally had it. This will aid in the braided look of the mosaic pattern. Like you see in the background, just because we forge it doesn't mean we don't hand work it as well. So when you're forging it, and especially when you put it on bias, it tends to put a big warp in it. And any warp in a metal is no good. Here Chris, my forge mate, is holding it for me, and I'm smacking it with a 6-pound sledge to get it nice and straight. The straighter you have it before for when you're forging, the better it will be for post-processing and secondary cutting. Here I'm using a knee mill to go ahead and true up the sides, so this will make it easier to stack together and have the less likeliness of having air gaps, which could form scale and inclusion. Now the metal's starting to look flat and square as we've got a couple passes on the mill. I'm using carbide inserts on this base mill, and it's running pretty hot, but it's still okay because carbide's a lot harder. This is the genius that Morocco came up with, and it's an alternating stack, and so hopefully this comes out looking like a braid. Here I'm using the TIG welder to fusion weld all the gaps and corners. Hopefully this prevents any air gaps that the heat can sink into, and once again creates forge scale and possibly an inclusion. I'm not very experienced with TIG, but I'm having a lot of fun with it. So I've cut the tip off and I'm restacking it in the back. This is at the recommendation of both Morocco and Alex. What it does is it creates a better platform when you're forge welding it. So now I'm going to use the TIG welder again, and I'm going to tack it together and then fusion weld all the seams. Once again, preventing any air penetration from the weld zone. Here I'm just welding up the last couple seams, and now we have a nice tight and closed off from air penetration billet. So next steps, we're going to throw this in the forge at 2200 degrees or so. I'm going to forge weld it together and then forge a knife shape out of it. We're usually shooting for an integral bolster Damascus chef knife. It's kind of my style. It goes along with what Morocco and Alex have been doing as well. Anyway, thanks for stopping by, and if you like the video, hit subscribe, thumbs up. There's going to be more to come.